The mining colony on the far edge of the galaxy was quiet that day. The twin suns hung low in the sky, casting long golden light over the dusty streets. Men and women finished their shifts in the mines, their clothes covered in fine red dust. Traders in the open market closed their stalls, counting the day's earnings. Children ran between the stalls laughing, playing games, their feet kicking up little clouds of dirt. In the air, there was only the sound of wind moving through the steel supports of the buildings. It had been like this for years, calm, simple. Safe. The people of the colony rarely thought about the rest of the galaxy. Earth was far away. Wars were far away. Here they only cared about ore shipments and the next harvest. A few miners leaned against a rail near the edge of the settlement, looking out at the deep red canyons that stretched for miles. The sky above them clear and empty, inside the small cafe near the market. Old miner Rallan sipped his tea slowly, watching the children play outside, beside him. His granddaughter Mira drew little stars on a scrap of paper. She smiled up at him, asking if real stars were brighter than the ones she drew. Rallan laughed and said yes, far brighter, far more beautiful. He promised to take her to the observatory one night so she could see them for herself. Outside, a group of traders argued over prices, their voices friendly. The peace broke in the smallest way at first. A single shadow passed over the ground, so thin and quick it seemed like a cloud. But there were no clouds that day. Rallan looked up, frowning. Another shadow came, longer this time. Mira stopped drawing and stared out the window. The traders paused mid-sentence. The sound of laughter from the children faded. One boy pointed to the horizon and shouted something no one understood at first. Far above the canyon walls, something was moving, slow at first, then faster. Black shapes growing larger as they approached. The miners near the edge of the settlement stood, squinting into the light. A deep hum began to fill the air, the kind of sound that settled in the chest rather than the ears. People stepped into the streets, shielding their eyes. The shapes became ships. Not like the cargo freighters that sometimes visited. These were sharper, darker, their hulls black and red, lined with strange glowing marks. There were dozens then. Hundreds. The hum turned into a steady, pulsing vibration. The ground itself seemed to tremble. A child cried. Her mother pulled her close. Someone shouted to get inside, but it was already too late. The ships broke formation and spread out over the colony, long metal arms unfolding from their sides, the air filled with a smell like burning metal. Rallan grabbed Mira's hand and tried to pull her toward the cafe door, but a beam of blue light tore through the far side of the market, vaporizing 2 stalls in an instant. The sound was deafening. Panic hit like a wave. People ran in every direction, screaming. The beams swept across the streets, cutting through buildings as if they were paper. The comm station on the far hill tried to broadcast a distress call, but another beam struck it before the message could finish. The tower exploded in a cloud of sparks and smoke. Through the chaos, a small team of militia tried to fight back, their rifles flashing against the dark shapes in the sky. But the return fire was merciless. One by one they fell. The alien ships moved with perfect precision. Cold and without hesitation, Mira stumbled, falling to her knees. Rallan pulled her up, his heart pounding. He looked around for a safe place but saw none. The cafe was burning. The market was gone. A man ran past carrying his child, only to be caught in another blast. The sound of his scream mixed with the roar of the ships. Above it all, one massive vessel hovered, larger than all the others, its shadow covering nearly the whole settlement. From its underside a deep red glow began to form. The air crackled. Everyone who could see it froze in terror. A voice spoke from the sky, calm and cold, speaking in a language no one understood. The tone made it clear. It was an order. The glow turned into a beam that struck the center of the colony. The shockwave threw people from their feet. Dust and fire filled the air. Windows shattered. Rallan shielded Mira as debris rained down. The ground shook again and again as more blasts struck. Somewhere in the chaos, A worker with a CUM device managed to send a half-finished distress call, the voice trembling as they shouted coordinates. Then the transmission cut with a scream. Far away on Earth, this broken message would be the only sign of what happened here. The alien ships moved like predators, no rush, no mercy. Beams of light carved the settlement apart section by section. Fire spread quickly, turning the dusty streets into rivers of flame. The people still alive ran for the canyon, hoping to hide. But smaller ships dropped from the main fleet to cut them off. In the end, the noise faded. The screams died away. The hum of the ships dimmed to silence. The air was thick with smoke. The smell of burning metal and stone filled the lungs. The colony was gone. Only broken walls and blackened ground remained. One last drone passed over the ruins, scanning for survivors. In the shadow of a collapsed building, Raylan still clutched Mira close, his body shielding her from the falling dust. Her toy, a small wooden star, lay on the ground beside them, its edges scorched. She stared at it with wide eyes, not understanding why her world had changed in minutes. Far above, the alien fleet turned in perfect formation and began to leave the planet. No words, no signals, no trace but the ruins. Their mission was complete, and somewhere in the cold space between stars, they were already planning the next one on Earth. The deep space communications array caught the broken signal just before it died. At first it was nothing but static. A hiss and crackle in the control room. The night shift technicians leaned closer to their screens, trying to make sense of the noise. Then a fragment of an image flashed a street in flames. Dust and fire filling the frame, a child's cry faint under the distortion. The signal jumped again, and a voice, urgent and shaking, shouted coordinates. The picture twisted into strange colors before going black. The last sound was a single scream, sharp and sudden. The room fell silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then alarms began to blare. Red lights spun overhead, emergency protocols triggered by the broadcast. Officers in dark uniforms poured into the room, ordering the feed to be isolated and secured. Minutes later, the data was carried down into the heart of Earth's defense headquarters, a bunker buried under miles of rock and steel. The place was never loud, even in moments like this. The air inside was cold. The lights dimmed to keep focus sharp. A long table stood at the center, ringed by the most powerful figures in the human fleet command. The footage played on the main screen, short and terrible: flames, screams, shadows of alien ships moving above a settlement. In the corner of the image, a girl clutching something, her face pale in the firelight. Then nothing. The silence in the room was heavy. Admiral Vance sat at the far end of the table, his hands folded, his jaw tight. He had been in service for 40 years and had seen war before, but this was different. There was no declaration, no warning, no battle, just a massacre. His eyes moved to the coordinates glowing on the smaller screens, his mind already mapping the distance. They sent no survivors. One of the intelligence officers said quietly, "No civilian signals after the attack, no life readings now." The words felt like stones dropped into water, slow and final. The President of Earth leaned forward, her voice steady. "Do we know who?" she asked. The chief analyst turned the screen to display a still image taken from the first seconds of the transmission. A black and red warship marked with alien glyphs, a match to old records from distant border skirmishes, the Varex Dominion. The analyst said, "No official contact in over a century, but their fleet profile hasn't changed much. These markings match." A ripple of reaction moved through the room. The Varex were remembered for brutality, but most had thought they kept to their own space now. Vance looked at the ship on the screen, the deep red markings glowing faintly even in the still frame. He had seen them once before, many years ago, during a mission that had cost hundreds of lives. They wanted to send a message, he said, and they chose a colony they thought no one would care about. "They're wrong," the President said, and her voice cut through the low murmurs. She stood, her hand pressing against the table. This was an attack on humanity. Every life in that colony mattered. Every one of them will be answered for. She turned to Vance. How long until the fleet is ready? 48 hours to full mobilization, Vance replied. But if you give the order, we can start moving ships within the hour. The president didn't hesitate. Then start moving them, she said. All of them, the order spread. Like fire through the chain of command, messages sent to every shipyard, every orbital dock, every hidden dry dock deep in the asteroid belts. Crews were recalled from leave, training drills were abandoned, and war machines that had slept for decades began to stir. At the North Atlantic Fleet Base, massive hangar doors opened to the black ocean beyond, and the first wave of battleships began to rise on columns of white steam in orbit above Mars. Repair crews scrambled over the hulls of ancient dreadnoughts, stripping away dust and fitting them with new armor plates. In the asteroid rings, civilian mining vessels were pushed aside as military carriers emerged from camouflage fields. The names painted on their hulls were old. Some so old, the paint had faded, but each was now being refreshed, a new layer covering the scars of past wars. Across the solar system, the numbers grew. Destroyers, cruisers, frigates, corvettes, carriers, gunships, Earth's might gathered. But the most awe-inspiring were the dreadnoughts, ships the size of cities, bristling with weapons and shield arrays, each one a floating fortress. Reports began to reach the High Council chambers from observers on neutral worlds. Alien traders spoke of human shipyards burning with light all night, of warships vanishing into deep space in perfect formations, of supply convoys stretching across sectors. Some in the galaxy laughed at the news, calling it human pride, saying no species could mobilize such numbers so quickly. Others remembered old battles and fell silent, their councils quietly canceling any plans that might risk angering Earth. Mercenaries turned down contracts against humans. Smugglers changed routes to avoid human patrols. In the war room, Admiral Vance stood over a star map, small lights, showing the growing fleet positions. Each hour more dots appeared. He thought of the colony again, of the quiet life they had lived, of the little girl in the recording. He had no name for her, but she was in his mind like a shadow. The president entered, her eyes scanning the map. They will see us coming, she said. Not as a question but a statement. Vance nodded. Yes, he said, but there's no hiding this. And we don't want to hide. We want them to know what's coming. We want the fear to reach them before we do. The final count came in before the next dawn. 700,000 warships ready for movement. Their engines primed, their weapons charged, their crews at stations, from the smallest interceptor to the largest dreadnought, all waiting for one word. The president stood at the center of the command bridge of the Eternal Resolve, the largest and most heavily armed vessel in the fleet. Her voice was carried to every ship in the Armada. They thought they could erase us in silence, she said. But we will answer. We will cross the stars and find them, and we will make sure they never forget what they have done. The transmission ended. The order was given. Engines flared to life across the void, and in perfect formation, the fleet began to move, a tide of steel and fire leaving Earth behind, carrying the weight of vengeance into the dark, across the galaxy. Whispers spread faster than light. On neutral trade stations orbiting dying stars, alien merchants leaned across tables, speaking in low voices about the sight they had just witnessed. Human shipyards lit like suns in the void, fleets moving in perfect formation, entire asteroid docks emptying as warships slipped into deep space. To many it sounded like a legend, reborn, but to those who knew humanity's past, it was a warning. The Varix Dominion's outer colonies were the first to hear the rumors. At first they dismissed them as propaganda, tales invented to frighten them into retreat. In the grand halls of their capital, their council laughed over the reports, calling humans an undisciplined species of upstarts who could never muster a real challenge. The laughter did not last. In the bars of the free worlds, mercenaries from dozens of species drank in silence. They had heard the old stories. The ones whispered even by the hardened veterans, how humans fought not for territory, not for resources but for survival and revenge, and how that made them dangerous beyond measure. An old Trask warrior swore he had once seen humans fight. A war for 7 years straight, never giving ground, never stopping until the enemy cities were dust. No one in the room doubted him. Out in the fringe systems, independent captains watched the movement of human ships on long-range sensors. One by one they began altering their flight paths to avoid human-claimed space. Smugglers abandoned profitable routes rather than risk crossing a human convoy. Pirate lords pulled their fleets back into hiding, unwilling to be caught in the shadow of the coming storm. Even the Galactic Council, normally slow to act and quick to debate, called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in the Great Chamber. The human seat sat empty, its flag displayed in solemn silence on the floor. Alien delegates argued over what to do. Some pleaded for mediation, saying humanity's wrath would burn the galaxy. Others claimed intervention would be suicide. "They will not listen," said the ambassador from the Korth Alliance. "You cannot reason with humans when their dead still lie unburied. Their vengeance is not a strategy, it is a force of nature." His words hung in the air like smoke. None could find the courage to disagree. Meanwhile, in Varek's territory, the mood shifted from arrogance to unease. Scout ships reported strange readings along the borders, faint energy spikes in empty space, navigation buoys vanishing without explanation. One patrol reported glimpsing a massive object in the darkness, moving without lights, its silhouette larger than any ship they knew. The transmission ended before details could be given. The Varek's military council met in secret, their high commander dismissing the scouts' reports as fear-born exaggerations. Yet in private he ordered more warships to the frontier. Still, deep in the lower ranks, the soldiers whispered. They knew the humans were coming, and they knew the humans would not stop. On distant moon colonies belonging to neutral worlds, news feeds ran continuous updates, grainy images of human fleets forming like storms. Video of colossal dreadnoughts leaving dock. The scale of it was unmatched. 700,000 warships, each one armed, fueled, and ready. For many younger species, the sheer number was unthinkable. Entire empires did not possess that many vessels combined. The galaxy remembered something else too. The human way of war was not clean. They would strike supply lines, burn fields, cripple communications, starve fleets before engaging them, and then, when the enemy was weakest, they would deliver the killing blow. It was a method born from Earth's long history of conflict, a pattern repeated through centuries. On a hidden listening post orbiting a dead star, a group of alien intelligence officers intercepted human encrypted messages. They could not break the code, but they could feel the tone from the structure: short, sharp, final, no wasted words. The humans were not discussing peace or terms. They were issuing orders. One trader from the Hellas sector told a chilling story to anyone who would listen. He had docked near Titan Station just days ago, while unloading goods. He heard the station's loudspeakers announce the departure of the Eternal Resolve. The flagship itself, he described its departure as a living thing, its engines burning white, the space around it seeming to bow under its mass. "It is not a ship," he told his listeners. "It is a promise." In a quiet sector far from the borders, a family of refugees from the attacked human colony arrived at a neutral port. No one knew how they survived. Their ship was old, their faces hollow. When asked what happened, the father said only one thing: they came from the sky. They burned everything, and they smiled. That single sentence spread like fire through the networks. The galaxy began to understand this was no border dispute, no accidental clash. This was the beginning of something larger, a reckoning that would leave marks for centuries. In the dark void between stars, the human fleet moved in silence, their positions unknown to outsiders, only their leaders and navigators knowing the true path. At the heart of the formation, Admiral Vance stood in the observation deck of the Eternal resolve, his eyes fixed on the starfield ahead. He knew the galaxy was watching. But he didn't care. He wasn't here for them. He was here for the colony, for the girl in the firelight, for every voice that had been silenced. On Virex-controlled worlds, propaganda broadcasts grew frantic, urging citizens to stay calm, showing images of proud soldiers and impenetrable defenses. But the people saw through it. They stocked food. They hid supplies. They whispered about evacuation plans. Fear was already blooming in their streets, in the council chambers of minor empires. Leaders quietly moved their fleets away from human space. Not out of respect, but out of survival. No one wanted to be caught in the path of humanity's vengeance. By the end of the week, one truth was clear to every world, every fleet, and every ruler: humanity was coming. And when humanity came for vengeance, nothing in the galaxy could stand in their way. In the cold black of space, the human fleet did not simply gather, it awakened. In the massive shipyards above Earth, the shadows of colossal hulls stretched across the stars, each vessel's frame humming with energy as ancient reactors roared. To life, the silence of decades was broken by the deep, steady thrum of engines warming, vibrations that could be felt through the very metal of the docks at Luna Shipyard. Workers moved like a living tide over the skin of the dreadnought Eternal. Resolve. Sealing armor plates thicker than a man was tall. The ship's massive cannons were retracted for inspection, their barrels polished and reloaded with fresh ammunition deep inside. Gunners ran their hands over the weapon controls like a pianist, over keys, reacquainting themselves with an old friend. Every corridor smelled faintly of oil and ozone. Mars Orbit Station released its first wave of destroyers, hundreds of them peeling away from their docks in perfect formation, their engines flaring in synchronized bursts. Each one carried the name of a fallen city or colony etched into its hull, memorials painted in thick black letters so that friend and foe alike would read them before battle. In the asteroid belt, hidden dry docks long thought abandoned opened, their armored doors revealing entire wings of stealth ships, each designed for deep strikes behind enemy lines. Their matte black surfaces seemed to drink in the light, making them vanish into the void. Crews boarded in silence, carrying with them blades, rifles, and the hard determination that came only from loss. Across every vessel, rituals unfolded. Pilots strapped themselves into cockpits and whispered the same oath taught to every human warrior: we return fire for the fallen. Engineers in engine rooms touched the hull for luck before engaging the power cores. Medics stocked their bays with supplies they prayed they wouldn't need. The massive carriers floating fortresses capable of holding entire cities' worth of fighters began loading their bays. Lines of sleek interceptors rolled across launch decks, their canopies flashing under the harsh white lights. Flight crews checked and rechecked each craft, marking kills and victories from past battles with fresh paint. But the most haunting sight was the ghost line, rows of unmanned warships controlled by AI, ships that bore no crew but carried enough firepower to wipe out worlds. Their hulls were painted pure white, a tradition among human fleets to mark them as the dead's ships, sent to fight without mercy. These vessels had no voices, no fear, only a mission that would not end until they were destroyed or victorious. From the fleet's forward command, Admiral Vance watched the assembly unfold on his holo-display. Dots and numbers shifted into tight formations, every ship's status blinking green. Communications officers read off readiness reports in rapid succession. In less than 12 hours, the largest armada in human history had taken shape. On every channel, orders came sharp and clear, navigation coordinates relayed to each vessel, fighter wings assigned to squadrons, capital ships given priority lanes through hyperspace routes. No one raised their voice. There was no need. The fleet moved with the discipline of a single body, each ship knowing its role. In orbit around Jupiter, the dreadnought Iron Will powered up its railguns, test firing into the gas giant's upper atmosphere. The recoil rippled through the ship's entire frame. a reminder of the devastating force each round carried. Nearby, the cruiser Vigilant Star deployed its new shield arrays, bright arcs of blue energy wrapping around its hull like a second skin. The shipyards on Titan launched the heavy artillery platforms, enormous vessels that looked more like drifting fortresses than ships. Each carried siege cannons capable of shattering planetary crust, their firing range measured in millions of kilometers. Crews aboard these ships prepared not for dogfights, but for the slow, relentless bombardment of enemy strongholds on Earth itself. Crowds gathered on coastlines and in cities to watch the launches. Streaks of fire cut through the night sky. As warships rose into the atmosphere, children pointed up in awe while their parents watched in grim silence. Knowing where those ships were headed, every launch was both a promise and a farewell. In the fleet's barracks, soldiers sat together polishing weapons. Some spoke softly about home, others stared at the floor, lost in thought. A young Marine named Carter looked at the photo of his sister, killed in the colony attack, and slid it into the inside of his armor nearby. A veteran named Hayes told the rookies what to expect when they saw the Varex up close. "They don't fight clean," he warned, "so neither will we, everywhere." The air was thick with readiness, no hesitation, no second-guessing. This was not a war for territory, it was a war for memory, for the right of every human to live without fear of extermination. The fleet's weapons were not just tools, they were justice, forged in steel. By the time the last ship cleared its dock, the human armada had become a living storm, its center the eternal resolve, its edges stretching across sectors, formations, layered so tightly that any who looked upon it from afar would see not individual ships, but a wall of metal and fire. Admiral Vance stepped onto the Eternal Resolve's bridge, his crew rising to attention, his voice carried across every ship. As the final order echoed, "Today we march for the fallen, tomorrow we will remind the galaxy why humanity is not to be crossed." Engines flared to life, hundreds of thousands of them, their combined roar vibrating through the void. The stars themselves seemed to shiver as the fleet began to move, leaving the safety of Earth's shadow behind, heading into the deep. Dark expanse where vengeance waited. The first enemy scouts saw nothing at first. The black of space was empty, silent, endless. Their sensors swept wide arcs through the void, searching for faint engine traces. The Varex ships moved in lazy patrol patterns along the border, their commanders confident that no human fleet could cross such vast distances undetected. They were wrong. The human armada emerged from hyperspace like the sudden crack of thunder. One moment the void was still, the next it was filled with steel, 700,000 ships slipping into real space in perfect formation. Their hulls dark and cold the sensors until the moment they fired, the shockwaves from their arrival rippled through the enemy patrols. The first Varex intercept group 50 ships strong attempted to block the human advance, their communications filled with sharp orders and panicked shouts. They hailed the humans, demanding identification and intent. The humans answered with silence, then opened fire. The lead destroyer Iron Claw cut through the enemy formation, its railguns firing in rapid bursts, each shot tearing through Varex shields like paper. Enemy ships spun out of control, their hulls venting glowing streams of atmosphere into space. The Vigilant Star moved alongside, launching volleys of missiles that swarmed the enemy like angry insects, detonating in waves of white light. The fight lasted 7 minutes by the end. Debris drifted where the Varex patrol had been. Their command ship split clean in half, still burning in the cold. The human fleet did not slow to collect wreckage or survivors. They pressed forward, their formations reforming as if nothing had happened. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Admiral Vance stood over the tactical map, the red blips of enemy forces retreating deeper into their own space. "They'll be sending larger fleets now," his first officer said. Vance's eyes stayed on the map. "Good," he replied. "Let them come. It will save us the trouble of hunting them down later." The humans advanced like a tide, striking at every listening post and border station they found. The Varex tried to mount a defense, but their ships were scattered and uncoordinated. They were used to raiding, not defending. Each skirmish ended the same human guns cutting through their lines before they could adapt. News of the first battle spread quickly. In the border colonies of the Varex, panic began to rise. Families packed their belongings and fled deeper into the core systems. Merchants abandoned their warehouses. Ships jammed docking bays as they tried to escape. All the while the human fleet pushed forward, relentless. In the third engagement, the Varex finally sent a significant force, 300 warships forming a wall ahead of the humans, their commanders confident that sheer numbers would halt the advance. The battle began with long-range exchanges, blue and red bolts lancing across the darkness, but the humans had planned for this. From the flanks, stealth wings of black-hulled corvettes slipped past the main engagement, invisible until they opened fire on the enemy's rear. Plasma torpedoes striking engine cores, cutting the Varex formation in two. The dreadnought Iron Will advanced through the gap, its massive forward cannons firing in a steady rhythm, each impact shaking entire enemy vessels apart. On the coms, the voices of human squadron leaders were calm and precise. Target lock, Sector 3-2 Alpha, fire. Shields holding at 90%, keep pressure on the right flank. There was no shouting, no chaos, only the cold efficiency of an armada that knew exactly what it was doing. The Varex fought desperately, but they were outmatched in every way. Their captains began ordering retreats, but hyperspace windows would not open fast enough under heavy fire. Human missiles caught fleeing ships mid-jump, tearing them into twisted shards of metal. When the battle ended, the humans again moved without pause, their sensors already sweeping for the next target. Salvage crews picked through the debris, not for enemy technology, but for the scattered black boxes and personal effects that had belonged to the colony victims, anything that could be returned to their families. On the fifth day of the offensive, the humans breached the first far-defined defense line of the Varex Dominion. Massive orbital platforms armed with heavy siege guns surrounded a mining world. The Varex believed the platforms would force the human fleet to slow. Instead, the Eternal Resolve led a strike group straight through, shields blazing as they absorbed the first volley. Carrier wings swarmed from the flanks, their fighters darting between the massive platforms and planting explosives at critical points. One by one, the platforms lit up in fireballs from orbit. The mining settlements below could see the battle in the sky, streaks of light and burning wreckage raining down into the planet's atmosphere. The humans did not fire on civilian areas, but their message was clear: military targets would not survive. By now, the Varex High Command had no illusions about the scale of the threat. Reports came in faster than they could read them. Fleets destroyed, colonies evacuated, their border sectors collapsing. Yet their council argued over whether to concentrate their forces or spread them out. Each hour lost gave the humans more ground. In the galactic underworld, the legend of the human advance grew with every retelling. Smugglers claimed to have seen entire Varex squadrons vanish in minutes. Mercenaries swore they had turned down contracts worth fortunes rather than face the human armada. The galaxy was watching, and the galaxy was afraid. By the time the human fleet reached the halfway point to the Varex capital, the stars behind them were littered with the remains of battlefields of drifting metal and silent wrecks, markers of where the humans had passed. Admiral Vance stood at the bridge viewport, watching the enemy's space grow smaller on the charts. "Soon," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Very soon, the fleet moved on, a living wall of steel and vengeance, carrying the weight of the dead with them into the heart of enemy space. The Varex capital world hung like a dark jewel in the void, its surface glowing faintly with the lights of sprawling cities. Above it, the Grand Defense Fleet waited, thousands of warships arranged in perfect battle lines, their hulls polished black, their weapons charged. The Varex High Command had gathered everything they could, pulling ships from every corner of their empire. The airwaves were thick with encrypted chatter, rallying speeches, and orders to hold the line. From the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Admiral Vance studied the scene on the tactical display. The enemy formation was vast, but it was rigid, a wall designed to intimidate. "They're expecting us to hit the center," his first officer said. Vance shook his head. "We'll hit everything," he replied, his voice calm. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in complete silence. No warning, no declaration. 700,000 ships unfolding into real space, like the opening of a great storm. The sudden appearance shattered the dark around the Virex world, their hull lights burning like stars the moment they appeared. Every human ship's weapon systems came online. The Virex commander's voice echoed over open comms, translated into dozens of languages. "Turn back, humans, or be destroyed." Vance stood unmoving, his own officer waiting for his reply. He gave it in one word: no. The single syllable was broadcast to every ship in orbit, carrying a weight that no threat could erase. The first volley came from the humans. A storm of railgun rounds, missile swarms, and plasma lances tearing into the Virex front line. The black hulls of the defenders lit up in explosions, shields flaring and collapsing under the sheer volume of fire. The Virex returned fire immediately, their own weapons burning white and gold across the void. The battle became a hurricane. Fighters screamed between the massive capital ships, weaving through walls of flak and guided fire. Dreadnoughts traded blows that shook their frames, shields buckled, armor cracked, and still neither side faltered. From orbit, the surface of the Virex capital glowed with the reflection of war. Human stealth wings slipped below the main engagement, using the planet's gravity to slingshot into the enemy's rear lines. There they struck hard-cutting command ships, sabotaging carriers, ripping supply vessels apart. Virex formations began to fray, their perfect wall breaking into scattered pockets of resistance. On the Iron Will, Captain Drex barked orders as his dreadnought tore through 2 enemy cruisers. In succession, the recoil from the railguns vibrating through every deck. "No mercy for their war leaders," he growled, his gunnery crews answering with precision strikes. The Vigilant Star led a squadron of destroyers into the thickest part of the battle, using its advanced shield arrays to draw enemy fire while the smaller ships flanked and gutted the Virex vessels. Its captain, a quiet woman named Solara, kept her tone measured over comms. "Stay in formation, keep the pressure." Her voice never rose, even as explosions tore apart ships around her. On the planet below, the Virex population watched the battle unfold through the atmosphere, streaks of fire cutting the sky as wreckage fell, their once proud capital now under siege. Government bunkers deep underground shook with each orbital blast. The High Council argued in fear, demanding the commander negotiate. But no one dared open talks with the humans. The Eternal Resolve pushed forward, its massive guns clearing the path through the enemy's core fleet. Alongside it, AI-controlled ghostline ships charged headlong into the thickest clusters, detonating themselves when their ammunition ran dry, tearing massive holes in the defensive lines. For hours the battle raged without pause, neither side willing to break. But the humans had come prepared for this exact fight. Their logistics chain stretched behind them like an unbroken spine, every loss replaced, every gap filled instantly. The Virex, however, could not match the pace. Their lines began to collapse under the relentless assault. As the humans reached orbital dominance, ground forces prepared for deployment, drop pods loaded with armored infantry locked into launch bays. Gunships warmed their engines. The plan was simple: take the surface defenses, break the Virex will to fight, and make them remember. The final push came with coordinated precision. Human battleships targeted planetary shield generators, their concentrated fire shattering them one by one. The moment the last shield fell, carriers released their drop waves, black shapes streaking into the atmosphere, flames licking their hulls as they descended toward the enemy capital. From the High Council chamber, the Virex leaders could see them, thousands of fire trails cutting through the sky, an unstoppable rain. The screams of the population filled the underground corridors. the once unshakable pride of the Virex people, cracking under the sight of an enemy they had provoked but could not stop. Admiral Vance watched the planet grow larger in the viewport, his voice steady over the fleet-wide channel. For the colony they burned, for the voices they silenced, for the names on our hulls strike. His words became the heartbeat of the assault, carried into the chaos as human forces began the final descent. By the end of that day, the skies above the Virex capital were no longer black, they burned. With the light of 1,000 battles, the soundless fire of vengeance that would be remembered for generations. And still, the humans did not speak of surrender. They had not come to negotiate, they had come to end it. The following cycle began with an odd tension in the air. The outpost had power. The shields were back online, and the repair crews had even managed to patch the worst of the damage. Yet no one was relaxed. It wasn't the fear of another enemy attack that kept everyone on edge. It was the Terran fleet still looming beyond the viewport, unmoving, watching. Commander Varric had barely stepped into the control room when the comms officer turned toward him. "Commander, Captain Hale is requesting your presence again, but not aboard his ship this time," Varric frowned. "Then where?" The officer hesitated. "He wants to meet outside the station." Minutes later, Varric stood in the docking bay, looking at the black Terran dropship waiting for him. Its hull bore scars from recent battles, and the air around it seemed to hum with restrained power. Lieutenant Morrow was there, helmet under one arm. "You'll need a suit," she said simply, handing him an alien-adapted exoshell. Varric slid into it reluctantly, the thought of leaving the station's safety unsettling. The dropship's cabin was dim and silent as it lifted away. The Terran crew didn't speak. They just checked their gear with quick, precise motions. Soon, the outpost was a shrinking speck behind them, and ahead, something vast emerged from the black. It was the Terran flagship, but now up close. Varric could see details that the viewport on his station had never revealed. Its hull was layered in armor so thick it seemed like a floating fortress, and scattered across its surface were strange shapes, weapon systems he didn't recognize. The dropship docked in a hangar that dwarfed any bay Varric had ever seen. Inside, the humans moved like a single organism. Squads training, engineers working on fighters, and officers scanning tactical maps. It was a living war machine. Captain Hall met him just inside the hangar doors. "Commander," he said with a nod, "I wanted you to see something." Without waiting for a response, Hale led him through a series of corridors until they reached what looked like a command amphitheater. In its center was a massive holographic display of the local star systems. Red markers flashed along several routes. "These are enemy movements," Hale explained. "The force that attacked you wasn't acting alone. They're part of a larger network, one we've been tracking for months." He pointed to the nearest cluster of red. "We think they're massing again, bigger than before." Varric studied the map. "Then why are you showing me this?" "You could handle them without us." Hale's eyes were steady. "Because if they hit us hard enough, they might bypass us and come for you again. And this time, we might not be here." The thought chilled Varric more than he wanted to admit. But before he could reply, an alert sounded in the chamber. A human officer reported, "We've intercepted a coded transmission. They're moving now. Estimated contact with our sector in less than 10 hours. Hale's tone didn't change. "Then we intercept before they get close." He looked at Varric. "You can stay here and watch, or you can come with us." Against his better judgment, Varric agreed. Moments later, he was strapped into a seat on the bridge of the Terran flagship. The launch was smooth but fast, too fast, and he realized the humans didn't waste time on ceremonial departures. The fleet moved like a knife through the dark. Every ship kept perfect formation, their engines flaring only when necessary. As they closed the distance, Varric's pulse quickened. The enemy fleet appeared on the sensors, larger than anything he had seen yet. Hale gave a single order, "Split and strike," and the Terran formation dissolved into smaller hunting packs. Each group moved to flank the enemy from multiple angles. The enemy, caught between too many threats, tried to form a defensive wall. But the humans didn't let them. They hit hard, pulling back just enough to draw the enemy ships apart. Then striking again, from the bridge, Varric watched as the flagships' main guns fired. A deep, bone-vibrating thud followed by the sight of an enemy cruiser's hull splitting in half. He had seen battles before, but never with this level of precision. The humans weren't just stronger. They were smarter. Every maneuver forced the enemy into a worse position. Every hit weakened their resolve. Within an hour, the enemy fleet was scattered, some destroyed, others fleeing in panic. Hale's voice stayed calm through it all, issuing short, sharp commands. When the last red marker disappeared from the tactical map, the humans reformed their fleet without celebration. As they made their way back toward the outpost, Varric finally asked, "Why help us? You could have ignored our distress call." Hale's gaze didn't waver. "Because when the galaxy leaves someone to die, we remember it, and we don't let it happen if we can stop it." Varric sat back, realizing that the humans were not just warriors. They were something far more dangerous to the balance of power. They didn't fight for territory or politics. They fought with purpose. And in that moment, he understood why the galaxy feared them as much as it needed them. The Terran fleet returned to the outpost in silence. Their ships glided into position, without flourish, taking up the same watchful formation as before. From the control room, Commander Varric watched them settle like a dark ring of steel around the station. It should have felt comforting, but instead, it felt like standing in the shadow of something far greater than himself. The crew greeted the return with mixed emotions. Some smiled with relief, knowing the Deathworlders had once again kept them alive. Others avoided the viewports entirely, unsettled by the presence of such overwhelming power so close. Word had spread quickly about the battle, how the humans had torn apart an enemy fleet more than twice their size in less than an hour. Varric left the control room and walked through the station's corridors. Everywhere he went, he heard whispers. "They're not like us. They're not like anyone," one soldier murmured. "If they ever turned on us, there would be no fighting back," another replied. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was respect laced with inevitability. In the docking bay, a Terran dropship had landed. Captain Howell stood at the base of the ramp, speaking quietly with Lieutenant Mara. When he noticed Varric, he waved him over. "Commander," Hale began, "we'll be leaving soon." The words were both a relief and a strange disappointment. "You've given us more than we could repay," Varric said honestly. Hale's gaze was steady. "We didn't come for payment. You called for help, and we answered." That simple statement hung in the air, but there was something behind it, an unspoken warning that humans didn't always answer calls. And when they did, it was by their choice alone. Before their departure, Hawley invited Varric aboard the flagship one last time. The trip across was quiet, but when the shuttle docked, Varric was led to a large observation deck at the very front of the ship. Beyond the glass stretched the black sea of space. The Terran fleet loomed ahead, their silhouettes sharp against the stars. "This is the part you don't see from your station," Hale said, gesturing toward the stars. "Every time we answer a call like yours, we make enemies, and those enemies never forget." Varric turned to him. "Then why risk it?" Hale's answer came without hesitation. "Because someone has to, and if not us, who?" They stood in silence for a moment, watching a small squadron of Terran fighters drift past the viewport like silent sharks. Then Hale added, "There will be more attacks, Commander. Not today, maybe not this year, but they'll come, and when they do, remember what you saw here. The galaxy won't save you, but Deathworlders. Maybe we will." Back at the outpost, as the Terran fleet prepared to jump out of the system, the crew gathered at the viewports. No one spoke. They simply watched as the black warships turned toward the deep void. Engines flared bright, and one by one, they vanished into hyperspace, leaving only the cold stars behind. The station felt quieter than ever. The air seemed thinner, the corridors emptier. It wasn't until that moment that Varric realized how much space the humans had taken up in his thoughts, and how their presence had changed the way his crew moved, spoke, and even breathed. Later that night, Varric sat alone in his quarters, drafting his report to the Galactic Council. He paused often, staring at the blinking cursor, wondering how to describe what he had seen. How could he put into words the way the Terrans moved through battle like it was second nature? The way they planned each strike as if they'd already fought the war 100 times in their heads. In the end, he wrote only this: "If you ever send a call for aid into the dark, and Deathworlders answer, pray they are on your side." He sent the report and leaned back in his chair. The hum of the station filled the silence, but in his mind, he could still hear the deep thrum of Terran engines, still see the black silhouettes against the stars, far away, beyond the reach of his sensors. The Terran fleet traveled on. Somewhere out there, another distress call would come, and another desperate voice would beg for help. And the Deathworlders, by choice, by will, and by the strange code they lived by, would decide whether to answer. Varric didn't know if they were saviors, predators, or something in between, but he knew one thing with certainty: the galaxy was safer when they were near, and far more dangerous when they were not.